The small apartment above Wong's noodle shop was filled with the sounds of everyday life. Pots clanging downstairs, neighbors' televisions, and the constant hum of traffic from the busy street below. But today, a new sound joined the symphony of their lives. The hesitant notes of a piano that had just found its way into their modest home. Lin Mei's father, Mr. Wong, stood back, his hands still dusty from helping the delivery men navigate the narrow staircase with the second-hand upright piano. His wife wiped her hands on her apron, looking at the instrument with a mixture of pride and worry. 6 years of saving, she whispered to him in their native language. Are you sure this was wise? Mr. Wong nodded, watching their 3-year-old daughter approach the piano with curious eyes. Music brings joy, and maybe someday she will have opportunities we never had. Neither parent had musical training. The piano was a dream, a hope that their only child might grow up with something beautiful in her life, beyond the steam and bustle of their small restaurant. Mr. Wong had fallen in love with classical music through an old customer who would play recordings during his regular visits. It awakened something in him, a hunger for beauty he couldn't explain. Little Lin climbed onto the bench, her feet dangling far above the floor, and pressed one key with a chubby finger. The note rang out clear and perfect. She smiled, pressing another, then another. Look at her face, Mrs. Wong said, smiling at her daughter's delight. What happened next would change their lives forever. Lin, after listening to her father play a simple recording of Twinkle, Twinkle Little Star, turned back to the piano. Her tiny fingers found the keys, and note by note she began to play the melody. Not perfectly, she was only 3 after all, but with an accuracy that made both parents freeze in place. How is she doing that? Mrs. Wong whispered. How does she know which keys to press? Mr. Wong shook his head, speechless. Neither of them understood that they were witnessing something extraordinary. A natural ability so rare that most musicians spend decades trying to develop a fraction of such intuition. In the months that followed, Lin's relationship with the piano blossomed like a flower turning toward the sun. She would spend hours sitting at the bench, experimenting with sounds, recreating melodies she heard from the radio, television commercials, or songs her father would play on their small CD player. Her parents began to notice that she rarely made the same mistake twice. Once she heard something, it seemed permanently etched in her memory. By her 4th birthday, Lin could play children's songs from beginning to end after hearing them just once. By 5, she was creating variations on these songs, adding notes, changing rhythms, composing, though no one had taught her the word for what she was doing. The Wong's restaurant customers began to hear about their daughter's unusual talent. Sometimes, when the restaurant wasn't busy, they would ask if Lin could play something. She never refused, skipping down from their apartment to the small electronic keyboard they had set up in the corner of the restaurant. People would stop eating, chopsticks suspended in midair, as the little girl played complex melodies with a confidence that seemed impossible for someone her age. You need to get her proper lessons, customers would tell them. She's special, but proper lessons cost money the family didn't have. Between rent, restaurant expenses, and saving for Lin's education, there was little left over. Mr. Wong tried teaching her himself, using books from the library, but his knowledge was limited. Lin learned to read music with surprising ease, but she was advancing beyond what her father could teach her. Then came what Mrs. Wong would later call the day heaven smiled on us. An elderly woman came into the restaurant one rainy Tuesday afternoon. She ordered wonton soup and sat quietly by the window. Lin was playing on her keyboard, lost in a melody that seemed to capture the rhythm of the falling rain. The woman stopped eating, her spoon hovering above her bowl. When Lin finished, the woman approached their table. "Excuse me," she said in a gentle voice with a slight accent. "That child. Who teaches her?" Mr. Wong explained their situation. Lin's natural talent, their financial limitations, their worry that her gift might go undeveloped. The woman introduced herself as Mrs. Chen, a retired piano teacher who had once taught at a prestigious music academy, before arthritis had forced her to stop. "I have never heard a child her age play like that," she said. "Not in 40 years of teaching." Mrs. Chen asked if Lin could play something else, something she had just heard for the first time. Mr. Wong played a recording of a simple Chopin prelude. Lin listened intently, her head tilted slightly, eyes closed in concentration. Then her small fingers found the keys and she began to play. Not perfectly, There were mistakes, but the essence of the piece was there. The emotion, the rhythm, the soul. Mrs. Chen's eyes filled with tears. "There are gifts that appear once in a generation," she told Lynn's stunned parents. "Your daughter possesses such a gift." That afternoon changed everything. Mrs. Chen offered to teach Lynn twice a week, charging only what the family could afford. It would be a crime against music itself to let this talent go unnurtured, she explained, and so began Lynn's formal education in music. The old upright piano, which had seemed like such an extravagance, now became the center of their home. Mrs. Chen was a demanding teacher, but Lynn thrived under her guidance. Unlike most children who might struggle with the discipline required for musical training, Lynn approached practice with joy and curiosity. "She doesn't play the piano," Mrs. Chen told them after a few months of lessons. "She speaks through it. Most students learn notes first, then expression. But your daughter, the expression is already there, waiting to come out." By age 6, Lynn was playing pieces normally reserved for students twice her age. Her hands were still small, but Mrs. Chen adapted techniques to accommodate her physical limitations. What amazed the teacher most was Lynn's ability to hear a piece and understand its structure immediately. Not just the notes, but how they fit together, the architecture of the music. Their apartment became too small to contain Lynn's growing talent. Neighbors would gather in the hallway to listen when she practiced. The restaurant customers began to time their meals around Lynn's playing schedule. A local church offered their piano for practice when the congregation wasn't using the space, a better instrument than their aging upright. Mr. Wang watched his daughter with a mixture of pride and wonder. One evening, as Lynn played a Bach invention that Mrs. Chen had introduced that week, he noticed her small face, the look of complete focus, the slight smile when she navigated a difficult passage successfully. In that moment, he understood that the piano was not just something his daughter did. It was becoming who she was. Mrs. Wang worried sometimes. "Is it normal for a child to be so devoted to one thing?" she asked her husband late one night. "Other children play games, watch television. Lynn only wants the piano. She does her schoolwork," Mr. Wang reminded her. "She helps in the restaurant. She laughs and plays with the neighbor children. But the piano, it calls to her in a way we might never understand." As Lynn approached her 7th birthday, Mrs. Chen sat with her parents for a serious conversation. "There is only so much more I can teach her," the elderly woman admitted. "Her gift is outgrowing my ability to nurture it. She needs opportunities I cannot provide." The Wangs looked at each other, the familiar worry about money passing between them like a shadow. Mrs. Chen seemed to read their thoughts. "There are scholarships, competitions, people who support young talents. We will find a way," and find a way they did. A video of Lynn playing Beethoven's Fur-Elise, recorded on Mr. Wang's old phone in their living room, found its way to the director of a community music program. The director arranged an audition, and within weeks, Lynn was accepted with a full scholarship. The piano that had once seemed like an indulgence had opened a door to possibilities the Wangs had never imagined for their daughter. As Lynn's 7th year unfolded, they watched with amazement as their quiet, thoughtful child became known throughout their community as the little girl with the magical hands. No one could have predicted what the coming year would bring, how Lynn's gift would be tested on a much larger stage, or how a simple challenge would reveal just how extraordinary their daughter truly was. But for now, in their small apartment above the noodle shop, the Wangs treasured each note that floated from the old piano, each moment of this unexpected journey into the heart of music. Word spread quickly in their small community. The daughter of the noodle shop owners played piano like no child anyone had ever heard. On Saturday afternoons, when the restaurant was busiest, customers would linger over their meals, hoping to catch Lynn playing on the small keyboard in the corner. "Play the waterfall song," they would request, referring to a piece by Chopin that cascaded like flowing water. Lynn would nod solemnly, close her eyes for a moment to hear the music in her head, then begin. Mr. Huang, who owned the electronics shop down the street, was the first to suggest recording her. "People should see this," he said one day, setting up his new video camera as Lynn waited patiently at the keyboard. "Just play like you always do," Mrs. Wang told her daughter, smoothing her hair nervously. Lynn nodded, untroubled by the camera. When she played, she entered a different world, one where only the music existed. The video, posted on Mr. Huang's social media account, received hundreds of views in the first day. Then thousands. Comments poured in from people amazed that a 7-year-old could play with such skill. Is this real? How many years has she been playing? This can't be the same child in the video thumbnail. Lynn remained largely unaware of her growing fame. Her days maintained a simple rhythm: school in the mornings, helping with small tasks in the restaurant after school, piano lessons with Mrs. Chen twice a week, and practice every day. Unlike many children pushed into rigorous training, Lynn's practice never felt forced. The piano called to her, and she answered with joy. Mrs. Chen watched her young students' progress with a mixture of pride and amazement. In 40 years of teaching, I've never seen such natural ability, she confided to Lynn's parents. She doesn't just play the notes. She understands the music in a way that most adults never achieve. The elderly teacher began bringing recordings of great pianists for Lynn to listen to: Vladimir Horowitz, Martha Argerich Lang Lang. Lynn would sit completely still, absorbing every nuance, every interpretation. After listening, she would often return to the piano and play passages that echoed what she had heard, but with subtle differences that reflected her own understanding of the music. One rainy Sunday, a stranger appeared at the noodle shop. He introduced himself as Professor Wu from the City Conservatory of Music. "I saw a video of your daughter playing Chopin," he explained to Lynn's surprised parents. "I had to see for myself if it was real." Mr. Wang invited the professor upstairs to their apartment, where Lynn was practicing a Bach prelude. The professor stood silently in the doorway, listening, his expression shifting from curiosity to disbelief. "May I?" he asked when Lynn finished, gesturing toward the piano. He sat down and played a complex series of chords and scales. "Can you play that back to me?" Lynn nodded, waited for him to stand, then sat at the piano. Her small hands moved across the keys, reproducing exactly what the professor had played. When she finished, she looked up at him with a question in her eyes, as if to ask, "Was that right?" Professor Wu turned to her parents. "It's like watching Mozart reborn," he said quietly. "Your daughter has what we call absolute pitch and an extraordinary musical memory. But more than that, she has something that cannot be taught, a natural understanding of music as a language." The professor suggested that Lynn audition for the conservatory's special program for gifted children. But the program required students to be at least 10 years old, and Lynn was only 7. "Rules can sometimes bend for exceptional talents," the professor said, "but she would need to prepare a challenging audition piece." Mrs. Chen took on this challenge with determination. She chose Beethoven's Piano Sonata No. 14, commonly known as the Moonlight Sonata, a piece that required both technical skill and emotional depth. For weeks, Lynn worked on the sonata, her small fingers stretching to reach the chords, her face serious with concentration. The day before the audition, disaster struck. Lynn woke with a high fever, her small body burning with infection. The doctor diagnosed strep throat and prescribed antibiotics, but the audition would have to be postponed. Mr. Wang called Professor Wu to explain the situation. "Let me know when she's well," the professor said. "The talent I saw doesn't come along every day. We'll wait." 2 weeks later, fully recovered, Lynn walked into the grand hall of the City Conservatory. The auditorium was mostly empty, just Professor Wu and 2 other teachers sitting in the front row. The grand piano on stage gleamed under the lights, much larger than Lynn's upright at home. Mr. and Mrs. Wang sat nervously in the back row, holding hands. Mrs. Chen sat nearby, her face calm but her hands clutching her purse tightly. Lynn walked to the piano, adjusted the bench, and looked at Professor Wu. He nodded encouragingly. Without sheet music, Lynn began to play the first movement of the Moonlight Sonata. The haunting, gentle notes filled the hall. Lynn's face was serene, lost in the music, her small body swaying slightly with the rhythm. When she finished the first movement, there was silence. Then Professor Wu asked, "Do you know the third movement as well?" The third movement was a tempest of sound, fast, technically demanding, considered far beyond the abilities of most children. Mrs. Chen had played recordings of it for Lynn, but hadn't expected her to learn it yet. Lynn nodded. She took a deep breath and began. Her hands flew across the keys, bringing to life Beethoven's storm of emotion. Her fingers, still small with childhood, somehow found every note. When the final chords resounded through the hall, there was a moment of stunned silence. Then one of the teachers stood up and began to clap. The others joined in, their applause echoing in the grand space. "Exceptional," Professor Wu said when Lin approached them after her performance. "We would be honored to have you join our program regardless of age." Life changed quickly after that. Lin attended regular school in the mornings and went to the conservatory 3 afternoons a week. The Wongs adjusted their work schedules, taking turns to accompany her on the hour-long bus ride to the city. They never complained about the extra work or the lost income from shorter restaurant hours. "Our daughter has been given a gift," Mr. Wong said, when neighbors expressed concern about their long hours. "It's our job to help her unwrap it." Lin was the youngest student at the conservatory by several years. At first, the older children viewed her with curiosity and some skepticism. But when they heard her play, the skepticism vanished. Lin made friends slowly, her quiet nature and intense focus setting her apart. But music was a universal language, and gradually, she found her place among the other young musicians. Her first public recital at the conservatory drew a surprisingly large audience. Many who had seen the videos online came to witness Lin's talent in person. She played pieces by Bach, Mozart, and Chopin, her selection showcasing both technical skill and emotional range. The audience gave her a standing ovation. Local newspapers wrote about the prodigy from the noodle shop. A television crew came to interview the family and film Lin playing on her upright piano at home. Through it all, Lin remained the same thoughtful, quiet child, more interested in discovering new music than in the attention she received. At the restaurant, customers now often had to wait for tables. Some came just to say they had eaten at the home of the famous young pianist. The Wongs remained humble, grateful for the business but protective of Lin's childhood. "She is a child first. Pianist second," Mrs. Wong would remind people who asked too many questions or made suggestions about Lin's future. Professor Wu became a regular visitor to their home, often bringing sheet music or recordings he thought Lin might enjoy. One evening in early spring, just after Lin's 8th birthday, he arrived with unusual excitement. "The National Youth Piano Competition has been announced," he told them, placing a brochure on their table. "It's the most prestigious competition for young musicians in the country." Mrs. Wong looked at the glossy pictures of teenagers at grand pianos. "Isn't this for older students?" "Look at these competitors," Professor Wu nodded. "Typically, yes. Most contestants are between 12 and 18. But there's no official age minimum." He looked at Lin, who was listening quietly. "I believe she's ready." Mrs. Chen, who had joined them for dinner, looked concerned. "The competition pieces will be extremely challenging. And the pressure of performing in front of the national judges, the justices, they call them, would be intense for anyone, let alone a child her age." "I want to try," Lin said softly, speaking up for the first time. They all turned to look at her, surprised by her certainty. "Are you sure, little one?" her father asked. Lin nodded. "The music tells me I'm ready," she said simply. And so the preparation began. Lin's practice hours increased. Professor Wu selected ambitious pieces that would showcase her unique abilities. A Bach fugue to demonstrate her technical precision, a Chopin nocturne to reveal her emotional depth, and a challenging listitude to prove her virtuosity. The days grew long. Lin would practice until her parents gently reminded her it was bedtime. Sometimes they would find her at the piano early in the morning, working through a difficult passage before school. Despite the intense preparation, Lin never lost her love of music or her childhood joy. She still played with neighborhood children, still helped fold napkins in the restaurant, still laughed at her father's jokes. But when she sat at the piano, she transformed, becoming a vessel for something larger than herself, something timeless and profound. 1 month before the competition, Professor Wu arranged for Lin to practice on the concert grand piano at the conservatory's main hall. The magnificent instrument with its rich, resonant sound inspired Lin to new heights. Her playing became more confident, more nuanced. "She's ready," Professor Wu told her parents after one such practice session. "Now we just have to help her believe it." The night before they were to leave for the capital city, where the competition would be held, Lin sat at her upright piano at home. She played a simple melody, the first piece she had ever learned, "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." Her parents, watching from the doorway, felt tears come to their eyes. remembering the 3-year-old who had first touched those keys. "No matter what happens tomorrow," Mr. Wong said quietly, "that little girl has already given us more joy than we could have imagined." Lynn smiled up at them, her fingers still dancing lightly over the keys. "The piano was waiting for me," she said with the simple wisdom of childhood. "Tomorrow I'll show everyone why." The capital city rose around them like a forest of glass and steel. Lynn pressed her face against the taxi window, taking in the towering buildings that seemed to touch the clouds. Everything was bigger here, the streets, the crowds, the noise. Mr. Wong held his daughter's small hand as they followed Professor Wu through the bustling hotel lobby. "The other competitors are staying here too," Professor Wu explained, checking them in. "The preliminary rounds will be held at the university auditorium, but the finals will take place at the National Concert Hall." Lynn nodded, her eyes wide as she absorbed every detail. She had never been in a hotel before. The elevator, the key cards, the plush carpets, all of it fascinated her. But nothing captured her attention more than the grand piano in the corner of the hotel lobby. "Can I play it?" she whispered to her father. Mr. Wong looked questioningly at Professor Wu, who nodded. "It's there for the guests. I don't see why not." Lynn approached the piano reverently, running her fingers lightly over the polished wood before sitting on the bench. She began with a simple Chopin prelude, her small fingers dancing over the keys. Hotel guests paused, looking around for the source of the beautiful music. A small crowd gathered, watching in amazement as the tiny girl played with effortless grace. When she finished, there was a moment of silence before the spontaneous applause. Lynn blushed, bowing slightly as her father had taught her. As they walked toward the elevator, a tall boy in a crisp white shirt stopped them. "You're here for the competition?" he asked, looking down at Lynn with a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. Lynn nodded shyly. "How old are you?" "8, she replied softly. The boy raised his eyebrows. "I'm 16. Been playing since I was 4. He studied her for a moment longer. "Good luck. You'll need it." He walked away without waiting for a response. Mrs. Wong frowned at his retreating back. "Not very friendly," Professor Wu chuckled. "The competition is fierce. Some of these students have been preparing their whole lives for this opportunity. They're not used to seeing someone so young in their ranks." In their hotel room, Lynn practiced on a silent keyboard that Professor Wu had brought along. Her fingers moved soundlessly over the plastic keys as she visualized the music in her head. Mrs. Chen had taught her this technique for times when a real piano wasn't available. "Remember to rest," Mrs. Wong reminded her, unpacking their clothes. "Your mind needs sleep to be sharp for tomorrow." The next morning, they took a taxi to the university campus where the preliminary rounds would be held. The registration area buzzed with activity, young musicians tuning their violins, trumpets and clarinets, while the pianists paced nervously, some moving their fingers in the air, rehearsing difficult passages in their minds. At the registration desk, the woman looked up in surprise when Lynn gave her name. "Lynn May Wong?" She checked her list. "Oh, you're our youngest competitor this year." She smiled warmly at Lynn. "And one of only 20 pianists selected from the video submissions. Very impressive." Lynn thanked her politely, accepting the competitor's badge that seemed too large for her small chest. The woman leaned forward and whispered, "My daughter is 8 too. She can barely play chopsticks. What you're doing is amazing." They found seats in the waiting area, surrounded by older competitors and their families. Lynn watched everything with quiet interest, especially the other pianists who would be her competition. Most were teenagers, some already looking like professional musicians in formal attire. They carried themselves with confidence, though many had the tense expressions of people under enormous pressure. A tall, elegant woman in a black suit approached their group. "Professor Wu, what a pleasure to see you again." Her gaze fell on Lynn. "And this must be your prodigy." Professor Wu introduced the woman as Dr. Zhao, one of the preliminary round judges. Lin May's performance of Liszt captured my attention immediately when I reviewed the video submissions, she told Lin's parents. Such emotional maturity in one so young is rare indeed. Lin listened politely, but her attention had wandered to a poster on the wall, listing the competition judges for the final round. 3 renowned musicians collectively known as the Justices. Their photographs showed serious faces, distinguished and somewhat intimidating. "Who are they?" she asked Professor Wu, pointing to the poster. Ah, the justices. That's what everyone calls the final round judges. There's Maestro Lee, the conductor of the National Symphony. Next to him is Dr. Han, who was once a famous concert pianist before becoming a music theorist. And that's Madame Yoshida, who came from Japan 40 years ago and founded the capital's music academy. Why do people call them the justices? Lin wondered. Professor Wu smiled. Because their judgment is final and rarely questioned. They're known for their exacting standards. Some say they can be quite harsh, but they're always fair. Many famous musicians today remember facing the justices in their youth. A loudspeaker announcement called the first group of competitors to prepare. Lin would perform in the afternoon session. They found seats in the auditorium to watch the morning performances. One by one, talented young musicians took the stage. Some played with technical precision but little emotion. Others brought passion but struggled with the more difficult passages. Lin watched and listened to each one, her expression serious and thoughtful. During the lunch break, they found a quiet corner in the university cafeteria. Lin barely touched her food, her mind clearly on the music she had heard and the performance ahead. "Are you nervous?" her father asked gently. Lin considered the question. "A little," she admitted. "But mostly I'm excited to play on the big piano. It will sound different from our piano at home or even the one at the conservatory." Professor Wu nodded approvingly. "That's the right attitude. Think of the instrument, the music, not the competition." When it was finally Lin's turn to perform, a murmur rippled through the audience as she walked onto the stage. Even in her best dress, with her hair neatly tied back, she looked impossibly small next to the concert grand piano. The bench had been lowered to its minimum height, but her feet still barely reached the pedals. Lin bowed to the judges, then settled herself at the piano.
She took a deep breath, placed her hands on the keys, and began her first piece, the Bach fugue.
The complex interweaving melodies filled the auditorium. Lin's face took on the expression of deep concentration that her parents knew so well, as if she had entered another world where only the music existed. She moved seamlessly into her second piece, the Chopin Nocturne. Here the emotional quality of her playing came to the fore. Though she was only 8, Lin somehow conveyed the bittersweet longing of the piece, each note placed with exquisite care. For her final selection, she tackled the challenging Liszt Etude. Her small hands moved with astonishing speed and accuracy, meeting the technical demands of the piece that would challenge pianists 3 times her age. When she played the final thundering chords, there was a moment of stunned silence before the applause began. "Extraordinary," whispered Dr. Zhao to her fellow judges. "I've never seen a child her age play Liszt with such command." In the audience, Mr. and Mrs. Wang held hands tightly, tears in their eyes. They had heard Lin play these pieces hundreds of times during practice, but never with such power and confidence. Professor Wu sat beside them, nodding with satisfaction. Even he, who had believed in Lin's talent from the first time he heard her play, was amazed by her performance today. The preliminary results were announced that evening. Lin's name was called among the 10 pianists advancing to the semifinals. The Wang family celebrated with a quiet dinner at a restaurant near their hotel. Lin, despite her success, remained thoughtful. "The boy who played the Rachmaninoff was very good," she observed. "His hands are so much bigger than mine. He can reach the difficult chords more easily." Professor Wu nodded. "Technical advantages are real, but music is about more than just reaching the right keys. It's about what you say with those notes. And you, Lin, may have something important to say." The semi-finals the next day followed a similar pattern. Lin's performance, this time including a Mozart sonata that showcased her delicate touch and precision, once again impressed the judges. When the 5 finalists were announced, Lin's name was among them. She would face the justices. That evening, an official reception was held for the finalists and their families. The elegant hotel ballroom intimidated the Wangs, who felt out of place among the sophisticated crowd. Lin, in a new dress bought specially for the competition, stayed close to her parents. The tall boy who had spoken to Lin in the lobby approached them again. This time his manner was different, respectful, even a little awed. "I heard you play today," he told Lin. "I didn't think someone your age could understand Chopin like that. I've been working on that nocturne for 2 years and you play it better than I do." Lin smiled shyly. "Thank you. I liked your Rachmaninoff very much." A hush fell over the room as three distinguished figures entered. The justices had arrived. They moved through the crowd with gracious nods and handshakes, eventually making their way to where Lynn stood with her parents. "So this is the prodigy everyone is talking about," said Maestro Lee, bending slightly to look Lynn in the eye. "Tell me, young lady, what does music mean to you?" Lynn thought for a moment before answering. "Music is like a different language," she said seriously. "It says things that words can't say." The three judges exchanged glances. "Well put," said Madame Yoshida with a small smile. "We look forward to hearing what you have to say tomorrow." As they walked away, Dr. Han leaned toward his colleagues. "Charming child, but the final challenge may be too much for one so young. That piece was difficult enough for me to learn, and I was 3 times her age at the time." Madame Yoshida nodded thoughtfully. "We shall see. There is something special about this one. Something I haven't seen since Liu Wei 30 years ago," finished Maestro Li. "I thought the same thing." Back in their hotel room, Lynn practiced on her silent keyboard while her parents discussed the day's events in hushed tones. The final round tomorrow would feature a special challenge, a piece composed specifically for the competition that none of the contestants had seen before. They would have just 10 minutes to study it before performing. Is that even possible? Mrs. Wong worried. To learn a new piece in 10 minutes? Professor Wu, who had joined them, sighed. "For most, no. They'll approximate it at best. It's designed to test adaptability and sight-reading skills, but Lynn's musical memory is extraordinary. If anyone can do it, she can." Lynn, overhearing this, stopped practicing and looked up. "I'll do my best," she said simply. "The music will tell me what to do." Her father smiled at her confidence. "Then we have nothing to worry about." That night, as Lynn slept peacefully, her parents watched her from the doorway of their hotel room. "No matter what happens tomorrow," Mrs. Wong whispered, "she has already achieved so much. She has made us so proud." Mr. Wong nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "She plays from her heart. Tomorrow, the justices will hear that heart speak." Morning light streamed through the tall windows of the National Concert Hall, casting long rectangles of sunshine across the polished marble floor. Lynn stood in the grand foyer, her neck craned back to take in the enormous crystal chandelier hanging overhead. Everything about this place felt enormous and important, from the sweeping staircases to the larger-than-life portraits of famous musicians lining the walls. "This building is over 100 years old," Professor Wu explained, watching Lynn's expression of wonder. "Some of the greatest pianists in history have performed on the stage where you'll play today." Lynn nodded, trying to imagine those legendary musicians walking through these same halls. Had they felt the same butterflies in their stomachs? Had their hands trembled slightly as hers did now? Mr. Wong placed a reassuring hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Remember what Mrs. Chen always tells you? The piano is your friend. Just talk to it like you do at home." The backstage area bustled with activity. Stagehands moved purposefully about, checking microphones and adjusting lighting. The 5 finalists had been assigned small practice rooms where they would later review the challenge piece. Lynn recognized the tall boy from earlier. Tao, she had learned, was his name. He paced nervously, his fingers moving through invisible scales. The other 3 finalists were equally tense. A serious-looking girl with glasses who kept adjusting her collar, a boy with curly hair who bounced his knee rapidly, and a calm, elegant girl who appeared to be the oldest of the group. A competition official gathered them together. "The final round will begin at 11 o'clock. You'll perform in alphabetical order by last name. When your turn comes, you'll be given the challenge piece in your practice room. You'll have exactly 10 minutes to review it before performing on stage." Lynn listened carefully, noting that with the surname Wong, she would perform last. That meant she would have to wait the longest, listening to the others perform before her turn came. "What do you think the piece will be like?" she whispered to Professor Wu as they found seats in the auditorium for the opening ceremony. "Difficult," he replied honestly. The composer was asked to create something that would test both technical skill and musical understanding. But remember, no one expects perfection with only 10 minutes of preparation. The judges will be looking for how you interpret what you see, how you capture the essence of the piece even if you miss some notes. The hall gradually filled with audience members, families of the competitors, music students, critics, and music lovers drawn by the buzz about the extraordinary young girl in the competition. Lynn spotted Mrs. Chen, who had arrived that morning by train, sitting near the front with a proud smile. At exactly 11 o'clock, the justices took their places at a long table facing the stage. Maestro Lee stepped to the microphone to address the audience. Welcome to the final round of the Grand National Youth Piano Competition. Today's challenge is unique in the musical world. Our finalists will encounter a piece they have never seen before, composed specifically for this competition by the renowned composer Dr. Zhang Jai. A silver-haired man stood briefly from the audience to acknowledge the polite applause. Each performer will have just 10 minutes to study this complex piece before playing it for you. This challenge tests not only technical ability, but also musical comprehension, adaptability, and artistic intuition. These are the qualities that separate skilled pianists from true artists. Maestro Lee then explained the judging criteria and introduced the first performer. The curly-haired boy named Bai Lin watched as Bai was escorted to a practice room. On stage, a large digital timer appeared on screens visible to the audience, counting down from 10 minutes. The crowd watched in fascination as the seconds ticked away, imagining the young pianist frantically studying the mysterious composition. When the timer reached 0, Bai was led to the stage. He looked pale but determined as he approached the magnificent concert grand piano. He adjusted the bench, flexed his fingers, and began to play. The piece that emerged was unlike anything Lin had heard before, complex with unexpected shifts in tempo and key. It contained elements that seemed influenced by both classical and modern styles, with difficult runs and unusual chord progressions. Bai navigated it cautiously, hesitating at certain passages, simplifying others, but maintaining the basic structure. When he finished, the audience applauded appreciatively. They understood the difficulty of what they had just witnessed. One by one, the other finalists faced the same challenge. The serious girl with glasses, Liu, played with technical precision but seemed to struggle with the emotional content of the piece. Tao, the tall boy, performed with confidence but missed several complex passages entirely, choosing to improvise around them rather than attempt what he hadn't fully grasped. The elegant older girl, Wei, gave the strongest performance yet. Her interpretation showed remarkable understanding of the piece's structure, though even she simplified some of the most challenging sections. Finally, it was Lin's turn. She followed the official to the small practice room where the sheet music waited on a stand. The moment the door closed behind her, the timer began its countdown from 10 minutes. Lin approached the music with calm curiosity. The title read, Labyrinth of Light by Zhang Jie. Her eyes moved quickly over the pages, taking in the unusual time signatures, the demanding fingerwork, the intricate interplay between the hands. It was beautiful but intimidating, clearly designed to be beyond the abilities of most young pianists with only 10 minutes of preparation instead of immediately trying to play sections on the small upright piano in the practice room as the others had done. Lin sat quietly for the first minute, her eyes closed, her fingers resting lightly on her lap. She was doing what Mrs. Chen had taught her, hearing the music in her mind first, creating an internal map of the piece before her fingers touched the keys. Only then did she begin to play, testing small sections, focusing on the most challenging passages. Professor Wu, waiting outside, could hear only fragments through the door, enough to know that the piece was extraordinarily difficult, even by competition standards. When the official knocked to indicate her time was up, Lin nodded calmly. She took the sheet music with her as contestants were allowed to use it during the performance if they wished. The walk to the stage felt longer than it actually was. Lin could feel hundreds of eyes on her as she approached the piano. The magnificent instrument seemed enormous to her small frame. She adjusted the bench to its lowest setting and placed the sheet music on the stand. From their table, the justices watched with particular interest. Dr. Han leaned toward Madame Yoshida. I wonder how much of the piece she'll attempt. Even Wei had to simplify those middle passages. Lin looked out at the audience briefly, finding her parents' encouraging faces in the front row. She took a deep breath, placed her hands on the keys, and began to play. The opening notes of Labyrinth of Light filled the concert hall. Lin started cautiously, her expression focused as she navigated the first page. But something remarkable happened as she continued. Instead of simplifying the difficult passages or hesitating as the others had done, she played with increasing confidence, her small hands somehow finding all the complex chord structures, her fingers mastering the rapid runs. In the audience, the composer, Dr. Zhang, leaned forward in his seat, his eyes widening. This tiny girl was playing his composition as he had imagined it, capturing not just the notes but the spirit of the piece. By the middle section, which had challenged even Wei, Lin was playing with fluid grace, her body swaying slightly with the music. The most technically demanding passage, a series of rapid hand crossings combined with subtle pedal work, she executed flawlessly. Professor Wu watched in amazement as Lin turned the final page of the music. She had not just survived the piece. She was interpreting it, bringing out nuances that he himself had barely noticed in his quick glance at the score. It was as if she had been practicing this piece for months, not minutes. The justices exchanged glances of disbelief. Maestro Li's pen had stopped moving on his judging sheet. Dr. Han's mouth was slightly open in shock, and Madame Yoshida's normally impassive face showed clear emotion. When Lin played the final chords, there was a moment of complete silence in the hall. Then, as if a dam had broken, the audience erupted in thunderous applause. People rose to their feet, some calling bravo. The other finalists, watching from the side of the stage, appeared stunned. Lin bowed shyly, seemingly surprised by the reaction. As she walked off stage, the composer himself intercepted her. Tears in his eyes. "Young lady," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I spent 3 months composing that piece, intentionally making it too difficult for the competition. Yet you played it as if you had written it yourself." The judges conferred longer than usual before announcing the results. When Maestro Li returned to the microphone, the hall fell silent. "In my 30 years of judging this competition," he began, "I have never witnessed what we saw today." He looked directly at Lin. Most competitors attempted to play what they could manage of the challenge piece after their 10 minutes of preparation. But Lin Mei Wang did something extraordinary. She understood the music, not just the notes. He announced the placements in reverse order. When only 2 names remained, Wei and Lin, the tension in the hall was palpable. "The first-place winner of this year's Grand National Youth Piano Competition is..." He paused. "Lin Mei Wang," the audience erupted again. Mrs. Wang burst into tears while Mr. Wang sat in stunned silence. Professor Wu beamed with pride. Mrs. Chen wiped her eyes quietly. As Lin stepped forward to receive the crystal trophy, which seemed almost as big as she was, Madame Yoshida leaned toward her colleagues. How did she do it? That piece was beyond the capabilities of pianists 3 times her age. Dr. Han shook his head in wonder. I watched her during the preparation time through the observation window. For the first minute, she didn't even touch the piano. She just absorbed the music somehow. Maestro Li nodded thoughtfully. We've witnessed something truly rare today, a talent that appears perhaps once in a generation. After the ceremony, amid congratulations and camera flashes, a reporter asked Lin directly, "How were you able to learn such a difficult piece in just 10 minutes?" Lin thought for a moment, clutching her trophy. "I didn't learn it," she said with the simple honesty of a child. The music was already there. I just had to find it with my fingers. The reporter looked confused, but Professor Wu understood. Lin didn't just play the piano. She spoke its language naturally, as if she had been born knowing it. As they left the stage, Dr. Han approached Lin's parents. "Tomorrow we should discuss your daughter's future. Talent like hers requires special nurturing." Mr. Wang nodded, still dazed by the day's events. But for now, all he wanted was to celebrate with his extraordinary daughter who, despite her remarkable gift, was still an 8-year-old girl holding a trophy almost too heavy for her to carry. "Ice cream first," he whispered to Lin with a wink. "Future plans tomorrow." Lin smiled up at him, her eyes bright with joy that had nothing to do with winning and everything to do with the pure happiness of making music. The morning after the competition, Lin's photo was on the front page of the national newspaper. Piano Prodigy 8 stuns judges, read the headline. The article described how the daughter of noodle shop owners had defeated competitors twice her age in the country's most prestigious youth music competition. Lin, unaware of her newfound fame, was more excited about the ice cream her father had promised than the crystal trophy sitting on the hotel dresser. She sat cross-legged on the hotel bed in her pajamas, enjoying a bowl of chocolate ice cream while her parents fielded calls from relatives who had seen the news. "Your grandmother cried when she read about you," Mrs. Wang told Lin, hanging up the phone. She wants you to play for her when we visit next month. A knock at the door interrupted their quiet celebration. Professor Wu entered, accompanied by Dr. Han, one of the justices. I hope we're not intruding, Dr. Han said, but there's something you should see. He held a tablet computer in his hands. The competition is always recorded for the archives, he explained. This morning our technical team was reviewing yesterday's performances when they noticed something extraordinary. He placed the tablet on the small hotel table and pressed play. The video showed Lynn entering her practice room before her performance. The timer in the corner began counting down from 10 minutes. Watch closely, Dr. Han said. On screen, Lynn approached the music stand and looked at the sheet music. She stood perfectly still, her eyes moving rapidly across the pages. Then, after just a brief moment, she closed her eyes and stepped back from the music. Our team was curious about how you practiced, Dr. Han explained. Most contestants immediately start playing sections focusing on the most difficult parts. But you didn't touch the piano for almost a full minute. The video continued, showing Lynn sitting quietly, eyes closed, before finally approaching the piano to test a few passages. But the most remarkable thing, he continued, was discovered when we examined exactly how long you actually looked at the music before closing your eyes to process it. He tapped the screen, and the video zoomed in on Lynn's face, rewinding to the moment she first approached the music stand. A small timer appeared in the corner of the frame. You studied the sheet music for exactly 3 seconds before closing your eyes. A stunned silence filled the hotel room. Mr. Wong leaned forward, squinting at the screen. That can't be right. The piece was 5 pages long. Dr. Han nodded. We thought the same thing. We had our team check the footage multiple times. 3 seconds. That's all it took for Lynn to absorb a piece that professional pianists would need hours to learn. Lynn looked confused by the adult's amazement. To her, this was normal. She saw music differently than others did. Once her eyes took in the notes on the page, they remained in her mind, clear and accessible. I just remember it, she said simply, taking another spoonful of ice cream. Dr. Han turned to Lynn's parents, his expression serious. What your daughter possesses goes beyond extraordinary talent. It's a form of musical genius that appears perhaps once in a century. The way she processes musical information is unprecedented in someone her age. Professor Wu, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. The question now is how to nurture this gift properly. Lynn deserves the best education possible, but she also deserves a childhood. The days following the competition passed in a whirlwind. News of the piano prodigy spread beyond music circles. Television crews arrived at the Wong's hotel, requesting interviews. Invitations came from prestigious music schools around the country and even from abroad. Concert halls wanted to book performances. Through it all, Lynn remained remarkably unchanged. When asked by a reporter how it felt to be famous, she replied, I just want to play piano and help my parents in the restaurant. A week after returning home, Lynn's life settled into a new routine. She continued her regular schooling in the mornings but now attended special classes at the National Conservatory 3 afternoons a week, where Dr. Han himself had arranged for her education. The noodle shop now had a permanent line of customers, many hoping to catch a glimpse of the young pianist whose story had captured the nation's imagination. One rainy afternoon, an elegant black car pulled up outside the restaurant. A well-dressed woman emerged holding an umbrella. She entered the noodle shop and asked to speak with Lynn's parents. My name is Chen Li, she introduced herself. I represent the International Young Artists Foundation. We've been following your daughter's remarkable story. The foundation, she explained, had been established to support exceptional young talents around the world. They were prepared to offer Lynn a comprehensive scholarship, the best teachers, access to world-class facilities, opportunities to perform internationally. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Chen Li said. Your daughter could become one of the greatest pianists of her generation. Mr. and Mrs. Wong listened politely but exchanged concerned glances. And where would these lessons take place? Mrs. Wong asked. We have programs in Vienna, New York, and London, Chen Li replied. Lynn would live with carefully selected host families during the school year. A heavy silence fell over the table. You're asking us to send our 8-year-old daughter to live in a foreign country? Mr. Wong asked, his voice tight. Chen Li nodded. I understand your concerns. But for talent at Lynn's level, this is often the path taken. Many prodigies begin international training at her age or even younger. "And what does Lin want?" a voice asked from behind them. They turned to find Professor Wu standing in the restaurant doorway, rain dripping from his coat. No one had thought to ask Lin herself. They found her upstairs practicing a new piece Madame Yoshida had sent from the capital. "Lin," her father said gently, "there's a lady here who wants to help you become a very famous pianist. You would study with the best teachers in the world, but you would have to live far away from home." Lin's small face grew serious as she considered this information. "Would you and Mom come with me?" "We would visit," Mrs. Wong said, her voice unsteady. "But we couldn't leave the restaurant for so long." Lin shook her head immediately. "Then I don't want to go. I want to stay with you and play my piano here." Chen Li looked disappointed but not surprised. "Perhaps we could arrange something different," she suggested. "Special teachers could come here periodically. Lin could attend master classes during school holidays. We could build a program around her family life rather than removing her from it." Professor Wu nodded approvingly. "The gift Lin possesses is rare, but so is a happy childhood. She needs both to truly flourish." The compromise satisfied everyone. Lin would remain at home, attending the conservatory part-time while special instructors would visit regularly. During school breaks, she would attend intensive programs designed specifically for her unique abilities. The foundation would cover all costs and provide a better piano, one worthy of her talent. 3 months after the competition, a documentary crew arrived to film Lin's story. They captured her daily life, helping in the restaurant, attending school, playing with neighborhood children, and, of course, practicing piano. They interviewed the justices, who had become some of Lin's strongest advocates. "In 30 years of judging," Maestro Li told the camera, "I've never witnessed such a phenomenon. The 3-second moment has changed how we understand musical cognition in young minds." The documentary included the now famous footage of Lin glancing at the sheet music for just 3 seconds before beginning her flawless performance. Music psychologists and neuroscientists weighed in, fascinated by her ability. Some speculated about extraordinary visual processing. Others suggested a form of musical synesthesia that allowed her to see music differently than others. On the day the documentary aired nationally, Lin didn't watch it. Instead, she gave a small concert at the local community center, playing for elderly residents who couldn't travel to larger venues. Her parents watched from the back of the room, eyes shining with pride. "Did we ever imagine this?" Mrs. Wong whispered to her husband, watching their daughter bring joy to an audience of retirees who clapped with gnarled hands and wiped away tears after her performance. Mr. Wong shook his head. "When I saved for that old piano, I only hoped she might find some happiness in music. I never dreamed she would bring happiness to so many others through it." The final scene of the documentary showed Lin returning to the National Concert Hall 6 months after her victory. This time she wasn't competing but performing as a special guest. The hall was filled to capacity. Lin walked onto the stage in a simple blue dress, her hair tied back with a ribbon. The crystal trophy that had seemed enormous in her hands during the competition now sat in a glass case in the concert hall's lobby, alongside a plaque describing her historic 3-second achievement. She approached the same grand piano where she had stunned the justices. This time there was no sheet music on the stand. Lin bowed to the audience, sat down, adjusted the bench, and began to play. The piece was her own composition, inspired by the sounds of her parents' restaurant, the rhythm of the city streets, the melodies of everyday life. It was technically brilliant but also filled with joy and the simple wisdom of childhood. In the audience, music students 3 times her age watched in wonder, their own understanding of what was possible forever changed by the little girl on stage. Parents held their children close, seeing in Lin the promise that extraordinary gifts could exist in ordinary places, in a noodle shop, in a second-hand piano, in the hands of a child. As the last notes faded, Lin smiled, her face illuminated by the stage lights. The 3 seconds that had captured the world's attention were just the beginning of her story. A story that would inspire a generation of young musicians to believe that greatness knows no age, and that music in its purest form needs only a moment to change hearts forever.